Straight talk from Israel. You're listening to Israel News Talk Radio.
Good morning, good morning. Baruch Hashem. Thank you, God. It is a good morning. My name is Andrea Simintov, and you are listening to Pull Up a Chair, straight to you from Jerusalem, Israel. Before we even get started, let's just say it is late in the U.S. and Canada, but you're up, you're listening in. Boker Tov Eretz Yisrael. It's early in the U.K. listening in. Germany, Australia's on today. Australia, I have to talk to you about the shutdown in Melbourne. France is listening in, Puerto Rico, and Jamaica. This is really exciting. Nice listeners, and everybody, the chat room is open. So drop me a note. You don't have to talk to me. And drop me a note. Let me know where you're listening in from. And I may have a question or six for you. Last week, we didn't have a show. There could have been a show. It was Tisha B'Av, the commemoration, the 9th of Av, when both of our holy Beis Hamikdashes, the holy temples, were destroyed. And I was fasting, and actually the day before I had a corona test. Yeah, little frightened that I was burning up with corona, and thank God I wasn't, but it was an interesting experience. And I thought a lot about the show, thought a lot about you, thought a lot about our interactions, our all occupying the same crazy, quirky, and very confused planet at this time in our human history, and found myself really awash with gratitude. Not sure how much time Seth Rogen is going to take on this show today. We lost 2 weeks, so I have 2 weeks of rage coming at me, 2 weeks of dealing with stupidity, and also 2 weeks of thinking that I really don't know the way everybody thinks. You like to think the world thinks just like you, but it's not true. So when we come back, let's see what else we're going to talk about. Blood tests, not so much. Okay, my name is Andrea Simintov. I am so happy that you're listening in this morning. I'll see you on the other side.
Always challenging the status quo. Hello, I'm Rod Bryant on Beyond the Matrix here at IsraelNewsTalkRadio.com. I want to encourage you to listen each week, every Wednesday at the same time, for an amazing show that will challenge you, inform you, and inspire. News, views, and wisdom for the nations here on IsraelNewsTalkRadio.com. Don't forget, Beyond the Matrix every week, Wednesday, here on IsraelNewsTalkRadio.com.
And we're back. Andrea Simintov, Pull Up a Chair on IsraelNewsTalkRadio.com. By the way, if you want to drop me a note, I love getting notes. And I think, Tom, I still owe you a letter. Forgive me. I have it starred. I do have it starred. You wanted the Charlie Chaplin Rules for Life. Yeah. Okay, so if you want to drop me a note, everybody, write to me, Andrea at IsraelNewsTalkRadio.com, and I'll be happy to, as long as you're kind, as long as you're loving, as long as you know what's the important thing in your life or you're searching for it, hey, we'll be pen pals. All right, so I had actually a very interesting conversation during the break. I made a joke. My husband, it's 7 o'clock in the morning here, and my husband... Holy Ronnie, right? We say Holy Ronnie. I don't mean holes in his pants, Ronnie, although I'm in charge of that too, so that may be. But Holy Ronnie, he loves Thursday morning because he doesn't have to deal with me. You do. So he doesn't have to be kind or come up with witticisms or tell me his dreams or his feelings. And I was having a conversation with somebody who said, my marriage seems to be like a nice marriage. Marriage is work. Relationships is work. Parenting is work. Childing is work. Who was it? I once had a client who said, it was a coaching client. She said, I can't adult today. Adult. I like that very much. I can't adult today. I have trouble adulting most days. And I was thinking about it, and I'm feeling particularly upbeat today, and it's crazy. It's surprising because I go to bed at night, the night before the show, and I think, what are we going to talk about? There's only one thing that people are talking about, and it's COVID. It's how COVID, Corona affects the wedding industry, how it affects the workplace, how it affects education, how it affects marriages and parenting. It's so bleak. And yet, what is that? Was a song, Don't Rain on My Parade? I'm feeling good because my world has narrowed down to the things that I can control. We can control what we put into our mouths. And yes, difficult as it may seem, we can control what comes out of our mouths. We can control the people we let into our homes, our holy homes, our holding it together homes, and we can decide what stays outside. I just recently put a big note on my front door in 2 languages, Hebrew and English, and said, no one enters this home without wearing a mask. Because, I don't know, people decide what the parameters are. Well, I'm in the building. So because I'm in the building, 12 apartments in the building, I can walk into her apartment and borrow, not a cup of sugar, we don't have sugar here, but, borrow whatever, or say hello, or find out if she paid the, community, upkeep. We're not wearing a mask because I live in the building. No, you can't. I have to tell you, one of the greatest gifts, crazy, there's always gifts in bleakness. I have a grandson who I mentioned, Baruch Hashem, I have many grandchildren, but one of my grandsons has a chronic illness, a chronic condition. And my daughter's family has been in bidud, in quarantine, semi-quarantine for like 2.5 years. They're you go into their house, if you're visiting and you're there for a visit, her son is away and he's being supervised. But most of the time when I go to visit, when I come from that airport, I have to strip down, not a pretty sight. I have to strip down, take a shower, change my clothing, and then I'm part of that world. Well, that's what our world has been today. But that's an act of love, not an act of defiance. Came across, we're all coming across these articles. People holding weddings and deciding that their wedding's okay because they really planned it. They planned it in chaval, too bad. They don't want to give it out. Wait a second, let me get past the Netanyahu riots here. Where are the wedding stuff? Hold on, I have a nice, here we go. Weddings, New York Times, not just the New York Times, my favorite rag to hate, but, it's in the wedding, this is wedding season, and weddings as a coronavirus super spreader worry. This is the new article today. Social distancing is the norm for most weddings, but not all. Young people fighting with older parents and grandparents. How can you disappoint me on this day? How can you stay away? And parents who don't want distance from their children. They don't want emotional distance. They don't want spiritual distance. Are being forced to choose whether to attend a celebration that could indeed threaten their, I'm getting out of control, threaten their very existences and make their children happy. Here's a quote. Here's one guest, an older woman who got sick attending a stepchild's wedding. I could just kick myself because I probably shouldn't have gone to that wedding. I'm thankful that I wasn't terribly ill with the disease. What are we challenging each other with? What are we doing? I said to my 91-year-old mother, who's in a facility, what they call what's it called? Dior Morgan, sheltered housing. She's independent living, always torn. Nieces, nephews want to pick her up and bring her to a family outing, and they say, no, listen, Grandma, listen, Bubby, we'll separate you. You'll be distant from people. The more isolated she is, the more her language lapses, the more her memory goes. And yet, I, on the other side of the world, who I am not there to pick up the slack. I am not there to be helpful physically, whereas those who are there. And yet, I want to scream, your job is to live, not your job to be kind. Some of us get it, and some of us are really tramping on the heartstrings of others. And here, this was one of the most chutzpahdik, okay? One of the chutzpahdik. Here, the stepson, the groom of this wedding. I'm not even going to tell you where it was because people are listening in from Texas, if you know what I mean. Here he is, a 27-year-old groom, said he believes his guests exercised free will when attending his wedding. My wife felt bad and said, I feel like it's all our fault because people got sick. Okay? He said, I said, look, they took a chance on coming. They knew the risk. People could have come or they didn't have to come. My friends listening in today, is that really fair? Are we really that open? They can come to my wedding or not? Do we not hold grudges? I have a cousin who to this day doesn't speak with me because 40 years ago I didn't attend her wedding. I don't know. People, I know that here in Israel, there's a hotline number that you can call if somebody is breaking, if you know that somebody is ill, somebody has been quarantined and you see them out, there's a number that you can anonymously call and rat on them. Not something, I don't know. I think it's something that Jews actually do well, but we're not supposed to. Remember the Judenrat in the concentration camps, those outing others? But it is. And a lot of the sickness, challenge me if you will, but I will be defiant. A lot of the illnesses are happening when people are going for tests. And in the 24 or 48 hours it takes to receive the results, they go about their business instead of putting themselves into isolation. From a personal note, I went for the COVID test last Wednesday, was not feeling well. Monday night, I started to not feel so great and very frightened because, I remember waking up in the middle of the night thinking, my gosh, thinking about death is very inconvenient. It really is very inconvenient. I have all these children and all these grandchildren and this husband who I kind of like and a mother. And I thought, I can't do this. And did everybody, just because I say, well, I won't get that sick. That's not true. Does it mean that everybody who succumbed to the illness, they weren't vigilant? They were stupid and I'm smart? No. It's not selective. It takes us all, and I was very frightened. And the real reason I didn't want to go for the test, I run a business. It meant contacting people. But the other reason was, part of the test is they put a swab up your nose. I don't like having things up my nose. I never even used nasal spray. I just think it's gross. Of course, I never gave my kids a suppository either. But is that TMI? Anyway, I went for the exam. And of course, on the way home from the exam, I felt great. I started to feel really good. It's scary, but I've heard of people. Oh, and then I got home and then I got a note before I even got the results, I got the note that I was exposed to COVID on the beach like 2 weeks earlier. So I had to go into quarantine anyway for 2 days. It was like it never ends. It just never ends. And then in the few minutes I'm going to talk about this, I'm very impressed with Melbourne. Not everybody agrees with me, but in the last minute, Melbourne, considering under a state of disaster, has instituted a curfew until September 13th. The city rules Tell me if I'm wrong. I have Australia listening in today. Only one person is allowed to shop every day. No more than an exercise of hour a day. Groups limited to 2. Recreational activity banned. Curfew from 8 p.m. until 5 p.m. I don't know. I think it's 5 a.m. Anyway, they're going to get a handle on this. They're going to get a grip on this. There's no cure in sight, no matter what you're reading. When we come back, we'll talk about how to remain upbeat and that jerk, Seth Rogen. Andrea Simintov, see you on the other side.
Shalom, everybody. Making a difference often takes just one moment and one person at a time. I am Orly Benny Davis, your show host on Israel News Talk Radios from Jerusalem with love. You'll be hearing people talking about politics, religion, social issues, and making a better tomorrow. Join me, Orly Benny Davis, for God and Country. From Jerusalem with love.
Wednesdays on Israel News Talk Radio.
Psalm 23, the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. Did you know this psalm and many others were composed by a Jewish shepherd and musician who later became a king? Would you like to know some of the inner meanings of psalms to help you connect with God and strengthen your soul? An exciting and easy-to-read book is now available which will help you do just that. Software for the Soul, Psalms for Everyone, available on Kindle, Audible, and Amazon.com. Software for the Soul.
Modesty at the beach? It isn't just about body image. It's about feeling good. Modest swimsuits, so we don't get burned by the sun.
So we won't get ogled by strangers.
So we'll feel free to express ourselves without the need to expose ourselves.
Let Marcy Modest help you to cover up what you want, how you want.
Made in Israel.
Visit marcymodest.com. That's MARSEA modest.com.
And get a 10% discount on your first purchase.
2 new shows on Israel News Talk Radio.
The return of the Jewish people to the land of Israel was prophesied in the Bible thousands of years ago and is coming true today. Shalom. Join me, Josh Wander, on Israel Unplugged. Listen in as we delve into the spiritual and physical aspects of the Jewish return to Zion. We'll discuss the biblically mandated, historic, and of course practical understandings of this incredible transition from exile to redemption. That's Israel Unplugged, every Monday on IsraelNewsTalkRadio.com.
How did a nice Jewish girl from Delaware end up living in Israel? Shalom, I'm Natalie Sapinski. Join me on my show, Returning Home. Meet different people who have moved to Israel. Hear their personal stories, their highs, their lows, and everything in between. Each week, we talk to experts on immigration and the process of moving to Israel. Listen to Returning Home every Thursday, only on Israel News Talk Radio.
Okay, we're back. Andrea Simintov, pull up a chair on IsraelNewsTalkRadio.com. Very nice. Oh, apparently Panama and China are listening in right now. Very, very nice. When I sit and I think, it really does make the world feel smaller, that we're all listening to the same thing this morning. And some of us even are disagreeing with each other. And it's lovely. You know, when I started this show, oh my gosh, it was a while ago. Must have been, I think it's about 2 years, 2.5 years. The engineers keep track of this. Anyway, I remember it was like I was being challenged. I started to get this really nasty mail, very angry, sort of like, I remember I used to listen to talk radio in America, and people would say the meanest things to the hosts, thinking that somehow they were immune. And I remember thinking, like, what do I need this for? I need more love in my life, and I need to give more love. And, but you know what? It got more, not only did it get tolerant, it got kinder. People started to challenge me, and I challenged back. And the dialogue really grew. And I like to think that a kind of universal friendship has developed. All right. One of the things I wanted to say was very interesting. It's like 2 weeks of shows that we haven't had. And a couple of weeks ago, a friend of mine on Facebook, and I say a friend, everybody's a friend. my Facebook friend, I love Facebook. When used really for holy purposes, for great purposes, I think that Facebook can be a fabulous tool. And it's interesting because I've reconnected with people I knew in college and in high school from the year Gimel. And very often, we've grown up. And we're not the kind of adults that we might have projected we'd be one day when we were kids. And a lot of us indeed are living lives that are emulative of our parents' lives. Like, I didn't know who was more conservative in high school. Nobody was conservative, And so I have this one friend, her Facebook page, in hindsight, I only began looking at it after she took issue with something I said. And I then looked at her page, and her page is absolutely brilliant, very well thought out, cogent, extremely conservative, but conservative and smart, conservative and not knee-jerk. Doesn't just say things that are right-wing and, forgive me, right-wing and stupid, the way I hear things that are left-wing and stupid. Well thought out and compassionate with a good ear. But anyway, something was going on, the rioting in America and the plethora of people under the guise of the Democratic Party who call themselves progressives. Progressive, very often to my mind's eye, is really, antithetical to things that are really basic American values of freedom and the right to free speech, the right to share ideas, the right to disagree. Anyway, she has a page, very passionate, and she's also an observant Jew with very religiously observant kids. And she wrote on her page, obviously to her friends, is anybody else here suddenly thinking about Aliyah? Moving to Israel, stepping up and going to Israel now. And, people started to write back, yeah, we were talking about it on Shabbos. Maybe it's time to move to Israel. Well, I was so taken aback. Again, from my perspective, I'm thinking, this is why you moved to Israel? So I wrote to her, so I wrote back to her that with all due respect, her name, Aliyah might be considered regardless whoever is in the White House. Oh yeah, it was all stuff coming out of the White House. And it's interesting, she's extremely conservative and yet extremely has quite a lot to say to the negative about the presidency of Donald Trump. And these things can go together. So I wrote, Galut, the diaspora, was meant to be temporary, a source of shame once the second Beis HaMikdash Holy Temple was described. And then my Andrea nervousness, not wanting to get aggressive, I wrote, merely offering another perspective, B'hatzlacha, great success with your decision making. I'm happy to discuss offline with anyone wrestling with both this correct and difficult decision. Well, I got a mouthful. Not everybody has to live in Israel. Not everyone agrees with you. There are other perspectives. Some of us can't do it because, and she went down a laundry list, all this kind of stuff that I could take issue with, but then it dawned on me, hello, knock, knock, wooden head. There are different ideas. There are religious Jews listening to this show, say religious, observant Jews listening to the show who know that we are supposed to inhabit the land, and they're not moving to Israel. And if I don't get it, it's because I don't get it. It doesn't mean that I'm not secure in my conviction, but you can merely say, it's very funny, I say for the Devar Torah part, but I'm going to actually jump ahead to what I had written because it's a great statement from the Chafetz Chaim. What is this great line that he says? Oh yeah, I want you to discuss this week at your Shabbos table. We're jumping ahead a section. It was the Chafetz Chaim who said, he who believes will not be troubled by doubts. And as for him who does not believe, explanations will be to no avail. Meaning we believe what we believe, and we also choose to believe if a belief system is not convenient. Yeah, I think I'm right. I think that every Jew, I think that secular Jews, I think agnostic Jews, I think Hasidic Jews, I think that what is it? LBGQ, Jews. Everyone belongs in Israel. Jews who are questioning, okay? Jews who put up a Christmas trees but are Jews. They belong in Israel. Come home. Let's have our discussions here. But you know what? According to my friend in our holy Facebook page, she disagrees with me. But you know what? I made my point and she allowed me to post it on her wall and she was great. Which brings us to this jerk, Seth Rogen. Let me say something about Seth Rogen. Let me teach you something, you bottom feeder. Yeah, he's a bottom feeder because, forgive me, he's an actor. He's a comedian. Very nice. Know your place. Know that you're earning great sums of money for entertaining. Entertaining is nice, but you're not a pundit. You're not a prophet. You're not a wise man. You're an entertainer, okay? And some entertainers choose the blessing of making their living doing something so airheadedly and lovely. It's like the bow on the bra. Nobody needs a bow on their brassiere. But you know what? It's a nice thing to look at. All right. Seth Rogen, you're the bow on the bra. So let me tell you one thing. It is okay. I give you a blessing. I give you a bracha. It is okay to shut up. It's okay to say, I don't know. It's okay to say, I can't comment. But you're invited on a talk show by another self-loathing, Jew-mocking cretin, and you get on the show, and two of you blessed creatures who suck at the teat of human ignorance, and especially Jewish ignorance, and you sit and you say, on my cheshbon, on my account, that Israel makes no sense, that religion is stupid, that you will never live in Israel. Shut up. I don't know. I can't comment. My father-in-law, my late father-in-law, I should say my late ex-father-in-law, everybody gets titles later on. He used to say, we would put certain food out and we'd say, Abba, eat this, try this. And he used to say in English, it was terrible, he'd say, not for me. Okay? It was not for him. I'm on an eating program, drinking program, where we say, it's not my food or it's not my drink. Meaning there's enough for me to eat, there's enough for me to drink, there's enough for me to believe in, there's enough for me to comment on, there's enough for me to explore. Rogan, you moron. You don't know. I have to tell you something. His wife's name is Lauren Miller. Lauren, you got a lot to think about, because you know what? He even insults you. He insults you in his comments because he takes his marriage for granted. And he sits and he says, it bothers her when I talk about this. She wants her Judaism, direct quote, she wants her Judaism to have some value to me, even though it doesn't in any way, shape, or form. And he says that his marriage to this woman was a coincidence that she was Jewish. You know what? No, it wasn't. It's very nice, dear listeners, dear friends, that we're all friendly, that we can all sit and have a cup of tea together and share ideas. But you know what? We might lust for each other because we're different. But the things that keep us together for long times are cleaving to those who understand where we came from. You married a Jew, Rogan, not because it was an accident. You married a Jew because you pinta yid, that little spark of Judaism connected to that other little Jewish spark, and you laughed at the same things, and you had the same parents, and you had the same history, and you had the same angst. So stop belittling that which was given to you as a gift. You know what I'm frightened for? I pray for his own sake that he stays stupid. Because you know what? When this insulting cretin, this user and this abuser wakes up one day and he realizes what he did, what he let out of his mouth, what he couldn't hold back because of his ingratitude, I'm frightened for how he will, as we say, stuff the feathers back into the pillow, unsay the damage that he did. Shame on you, silly, silly man, and indeed a bottom feeder. Okay, this is Andrea Simintov. Guess what? I'll see you on the other side.
You're listening to Israel News Talk Radio.
This is Shai Ben-Tekoa, and each week I'll be webcasting to you from Judea, origin of the word Jew, a people besieged and beleaguered in every generation. Nazi Germany's but a memory, but in its place the world invented the phantom Palestinians as this generation's internationally authorized Jew killers. Tune in for a different slant on life in Israel, Phantom Nation, every Monday.
Hi, I'm Rabbi David Aaron. The soul basics are the most profound, the most essential, and yet often the most neglected in our education. Join me for Soul Talk on Israel's News Talk Radio and discover the secrets to love, spiritual growth, and personal power.
How did a nice Jewish girl from Delaware end up living in Israel? Shalom, I'm Natalie Sapinski. Join me on my show, Returning Home. Meet different people who have moved to Israel. Hear their personal stories, their highs, their lows, and everything in between. Each week, we talk to experts on immigration and the process of moving to Israel. Listen to Returning Home every Thursday, only on Israel News Talk Radio.
And we're back. Andrea Simintov on Pull Up a Chair, IsraelNewsTalkRadio.com. Okay, it is almost Shabbos. I wish my house smelled. I wish it smelled like Shabbos and not the way it actually smells. I think I'm a little punchy. Okay, it's early in the morning and I've only had 3 cups of coffee. Okay, so this parsha is called Ekev. In English, it's spelled E-I-K-E-V, Ekev. And actually, Ekev, I had always, the story of Jacob and Esav is, they were twins, and Esav is born first, and Jacob, Yaakov, listen to the little rhythm in the speech. He is born second, holding on to Esav's heel. I don't know, tell me if I got that right. But anyway, and he's called Yaakov, the heel grabber, the guy who grabs the heel. And so it's very interesting because what do we have in a few minutes, I'm going to get to actually what in the world feet. This is not a show for podiatrists. This is a show to explain the difference. We have the rosh, the head, and we have the regel, which is the leg, and the kaf regel, the feet, and of course we have the ekev, which is the heel. So stay with me on this. There are 2 kinds of tzaddikim, holy men in this world. Some are those who became great, rose to greatness by just means of who they were, their innate nature. And then there are those who weren't born to that kind of loftiness, but rather toiled and worked on themselves, building up and improving their personal character traits until it became a second nature to them. And yet, during times, the playing field gets leveled, because during times of terrible sadness and terrible oppression, similar to the time that we just came out of, the 3 weeks followed by the 9 days, both types were pulled down to incredible depths of baseness and indeed degradation. The fact that both are well versed in the Torah doesn't prevent them from falling under the influence of the evil inclination. The enormity of a fall from holiness, is further brought to light by the fact that the sin of the egel, the sin of the golden calf, took place just 40 short days after the giving of the Torah. What's the lesson here? The lesson is to be on guard at all times, no matter how learned we are or how we reached our level of learning. Being learned in the Torah doesn't provide any of us with an immunity from the corrupting influences in our environment, our respective environments for sure. The Torah doesn't demand that we be superhuman. We're only asked not to deliberately engage in the acts of sinning. In the middle of an act, I have mentioned before, I'm going to actually take this mic closer to me. And, I'm a life coach. And one of the things I tell people, whether they're dieting, whether they're trying to beat the addiction of smoking, whether they're trying to beat the addiction of lashon hora, speaking evil about somebody, you know what we tell these people? Regroup. Remember what you know. Resume correct conduct. In this case, resume correct Torah conduct. Most of all, don't get sad over it. Don't get over it in a funk. It ain't over till it's over. Despondency is the thing that can pull a soul down to the most terrible, murky depths. So now we get to the point of Akev. Rashi actually comments on this. And in the context of the verse, it actually means since or because, usually denoting a kind of a cause and effect relationship. Because you observe God's commandments, then blessings and rewards will descend upon you. But again, Rashi, based on a midrash, says the meaning of the word akev uses the alternative meaning, foot or heel. He comments that there are commandments and values in Jewish Torah life that Jews somehow, they just take lightly. I remember having somebody in my orbit once who used to say to kids, that's a big mitzvah. That's not such an important mitzvah. And we go over this again and again. They take certain mitzvot and they grind them into the dust of everyday life by stepping upon them with their foot and or their heel, determining that some mitzvot are stompable. It is these, in an effect, forgive me, I can't think of another word for it, neglected commandments and values. These are the true key for spiritual success and a good life. Rashi emphasizes to us that the choice of the word ekev in the beginning verse of the Parsha is not merely a literary issue of vocabulary. Rather, it's the choice of that word. The Torah is teaching us a valuable lesson that in life there are no small things. There are no inconsequential acts. The rabbis teach us, we say Chazal, the rabbis have taught us to be very careful with light commandments, just as we are justly careful with the more stringent and the more weighty commandments. The rabbis emphasize that one doesn't know the true effects of his observance of the light commandments and the reward and punishment scheme, how heaven has it all lined up. The Torah is teaching us, in effect, to watch our step, to watch our actions, so that, God forbid, our heel doesn't unintentionally tread upon a holy commandment or abuse an important value. It's difficult for us to measure different values and the weight and the worth of any commandments of the Torah. And especially in cases when there are conflicting values and contradictory instructions, and there's a lot of those, we're supposed to study it, not master it, revisit it. The halachic process, the process of observance, resolves for us what our behavior and action should be. I'm trying to, here this is very, that I read, Rabbi Wein brings down this adorable example where he says, he's attempting to muster some kind of, devout concentration in his prayers, in his reciting of what we call the Shmona Esrei, the 18 prayers, when a poor man shoves his hands in front of his face and demands that he gives him some money. Well, what should he do? What should any of us do? Should we ignore the poor man and attempt somehow to regroup and get back into our devotion, our intense, our heavy prayer? Or should we abandon the prayer and give a coin to a beggar? With which value shall I tread upon with my heel? We're faced with these kind of dilemmas on a regular, daily basis. But somehow, if we can balance our priorities and not subject any of them to be ground into the ground under our heels, you know what? Great things can be accomplished. Yeah, we'll struggle with it. And even if we're unable to absolutely master that kind of a balance, just know one isn't heavier, one isn't lighter. It's the process, it's the access, it's the reflecting of it and weighing it. The Torah also emphasizes very often, all right, this we're getting here, and it also comes back to this this lower world thing. The manna that we had in the desert, we depended upon God to bring us our food. If it didn't come down, we didn't eat. But the fact is, everyone has to eat the food of heaven in order to have a meaningful, wonderful life. Manna cannot be stored for another day. It falls fresh daily, except for Shabbat, because Shabbos itself envelops us with a purely spiritual shawl. When Jewish people ultimately entered the land of Israel and settled it, you know what happened? The manna stopped falling. Real bread, effort, strength, toil was now necessary for the existence of the nation and the individual members. How does one retain a sense of spirituality when toiling to acquire bread to live on? It's not for nothing that the rabbis insist that our speech and even our thoughts on Shabbat and the holidays not deal with the bread of daily toil and struggle, not deal with the stomping and smashing of values and weighing and determining what is more important and what is less important. Instead, we're to treat the food of Shabbat as though it were of heavenly origin, and we're to treat the dialogue and the talk as though we are uttering the words of God. The secret ingredient in Shabbos food is Shabbat itself. To be able to live at least one day of the week on the word of heaven, so to speak, and not on the bread of man. That indeed creates a truly spiritual experience. I wish you all Shabbat Shalom u'mivorach from Jerusalem.
Israel News Talk Radio's chat room. Just click the orange button at the top of the IsraelNewsTalkRadio.home page, log in as yourself or an anonymous guest, and join in on the fun. You'll meet other listeners from all over the world who listen to Israel News Talk Radio, and you can make new friends. Israel News Talk Radio's chat room. It's the closest you can get to being in the studio with us.
We love listening to Israel News Talk Radio.
Where can you get the inside news on Israel? At Israel News Talk Radio, we're dedicated to sharing Israel's inside story with the world by providing our listeners with news on Israeli politics, current affairs, and Israeli Jewish culture. The Israel News Talk Radio homepage also provides you, the listener, with useful information at your fingertips, with scrolling news headlines, weather, currency exchange, Shabbat candlelighting times, and so much more. Our radio programming is always accessible and on demand. We operate absolutely free of charge for everyone, everywhere. If you love what we do, partner with us now by becoming an Israel News Talk Radio supporter. With your support, you'll be inscribed on our Israel News Talk Radio Wall of Fame. There's nothing like us in the world. Be part of something great. Israel News Talk Radio. Straight talk from Israel.
If you love Israel News Talk Radio, then you'll love our Facebook page. We keep you up to date on what's happening in Israel, plus little surprise treasures that we don't share on the radio. Go now to follow us on Facebook. Just look for the Israel News Talk Radio Facebook page, and don't forget to subscribe and follow us by clicking on the like button. We post great stuff there that you'll want to share. Israel News Talk Radio on Facebook and Israel News Radio on Twitter.
News, opinion, and more. You're listening to Israel News Talk Radio.